it has to be said that Universal Audio is one of the biggest names in recording equipment, to this day. And I think you would be the first to admit that it owes a great debt to you, the activities of your father,
well, a huge
Bill Putnam Sr.
Essentially, what he did was use a bathroom at the Opera House. I think that his recording studio was in Chicago at the time, and just put a microphone and a speaker in there, and then, kind of as the forerunner of the echo chambers, used that and captured the reverb from that. Also used a hallway there where they tried to seal it off, but I do remember him telling me on more than one occasion someone would be going into the bathroom not knowing what was going on, ended up flushing the toilet and ruining the take because everything was printed live and it was all mixed back in, so you couldn't just take that out. Well, typically they're rooms that are designed to be highly reverberant, which is just lots of reflections of sound. And what it is, they carefully position a speaker in there, and maybe multiple speakers, and microphones, and close the door. It's like a big freezer with concrete walls, plaster walls typically, and play the music source material in, and then record it back out on the microphone and capture the true, real room response. And you get a very highly reverberant and then sound, and then that's mixed back in to the dry sound to simulate playing in a big environment. Compressors came out of the world of radio, and to solve a very practical problem, and that problem was to deal with sound sources at different levels. And what typically was done before this was the engineer would be riding a volume knob, and if the sound came in loud or the soloist was a little closer to the microphone, you'd have to turn that person down quickly. If the soloist was further back, you'd have to turn that person up to achieve an overall balance. And compressors do just that. They take loud sounds and they reduce the volume, or they'll take softer sounds and bring it up in the mix. And in fact, this doesn't just start with electronics in purely acoustic recording. I was reading a book about the early history of recording where people would yell into big horns with a little needle that was etching in wax. They would have hand signals to tell a performer to get closer or further back. And when I read that, I go, that's the first compressor. That person was essentially compressing the sound. If someone was singing, too loud, you'd tell that person to get back. Or if it was a group of people going to come in, they knew they had to stand about 4 feet back. And so that's what a compressor does, is do that process automatically. I think one of the interesting things about compressors is it started as a very practical tool to solve a very practical problem, but in doing that, it had noticeable sonic character in and of itself, and has left its, as I mentioned earlier, sonic footprint on all sorts of recordings. And you listen to someone's guitar sound, well, a large part of it is because they used a specific compressor in the recording chain. It's absolutely both. The final litmus test is always ears. But it's informed by a huge number of measurements all along the way, and so each piece of gear wants to be handled slightly differently. It's not cookie cutter by any means. So one approach is typically to take the schematic, which is a description of how what circuits or what components are in there in the circuit configuration, and model that mathematically. Other times you can just maybe treat it as a black box, which is look at the signals that go in, what signals go out, and try to come up with do a signal-based model. And sometimes it's a mixture of both. On the photocells of the LA2A, we had to go and actually model the underlying physics behind cadmium sulfide cells to understand, what the right thing to do there for our device. And part of the art here is to know which ones are sonically and musically important and which ones can be ignored, because there's an infinite amount of complexity. If you really wanted to study every aspect of every piece of gear, you could go forever, and you have to, serve the musical goal and stop there, early on, we realized that we knew other people were going to be making emulations, and we wanted to come up with a philosophy that would serve us, and basically that was never sacrifice quality and never put out an emulation that we think was just okay. And that philosophy has gone since day one, and once you do that, the amount of power that you need to do these types of physical models and to really take into account all the different things you want to take into account, we want to take into account, it has a lot of computational burden. We still live in a world where audio doesn't quite get as much computing power as we would like for a lot of our higher end emulations. So we just found out of necessity we needed to provide higher levels of processing power. So that was the necessity side, and then additionally on the opportunity side, we ran across some folks who had some technology, who had very high-powered computing card at a very nice price and performance characteristics. Yeah, we started, our first products were hardware. You know, we're the analog compressors, and we've been doing hardware all along. You know, I like being on both sides of it. To me, music is really what it's all about. Now, I've get to live vicariously through the people who make music with our products because they tend to be more talented than I am. But at the end of the day, it's about music and less about electrons and electronics, although that is one of my great passions. But I'm a great believer in technology. I've also seen technology, attempts of using technology for musical purposes that leave less than wonderful results. I believe that you know, technology is going to march ahead, and we have to you know, hitch up to it, and the goal of artists is to sort it out. And I think the artists, you know, find what technology is relevant, what's the best uses of it, and I think there's all sorts of examples of both artists creating requirements that's met with technological innovations and specific products being developed, and there's all sorts of, you know, aspects of companies and research institutions coming up with technology that then artists kind of figure out what to do with over a period of time. And I think that synergy is really exciting. It's where I like to spend a lot of my time and my thought cycles, is, you know, how those two things interact, and how are they going to propel each other. The one thing where I think science and technology can let art down is to lax the quality standards. And we've seen that happen in a lot of cases, a lot of reproduction mediums. And I think that is a responsibility we have, is to try to push the envelope and continue to have high quality reproduction. Well, first of all, I can say that there's no shortage of ideas in terms of new plugins. Whenever we get together and you know, look at what stuff we could do and want to do, we're mapped out for years. So we're not running out of ideas for interesting plugins anytime soon, and there's a lot of stuff to do out there. On the analog side, you know, we're still very much committed to that. You know, when we got back into business, you know, almost 10 years ago, about 10 years ago now, there was very much philosophical wars going on between analog and digital, and there still are today. In some sense, we don't take a side. In that is that I believe that there's absolutely room for both. And I saw that the you know, digital audio workstation and the fact that you could recall all the parameters of your mix, and, you know, the workflow that it created was just tremendous. But you had to get audio in there in a quality way, and I think the mixture of both is really what we saw as being the right, you know, the future was a mix of both. And so we're going to continue to make analog products at the quality level we've been doing, and a lot more plugins.
Excellent.
Super.
Yeah.